Yes, I was at the University of Bath last year, and as part of my final project together with Property Solutions, I did a project on corporate reputation in the commercial UK property market. So the idea was seeing whether if a landlord or a managing agent or a building as such had a sort of well-managed property kite mark, if you like, whether that would affect the way tenants see that landlord or that building in future transactions. So the research, the way I built it up was by interviewing a few landlords, so face-to-face, sort of semi-structured interviews there, where I didn't lead them particularly, but I tried to get their views on certain subjects, and then an online survey of, in the end I got about 33 tenants to answer the survey. I had to get above 30, I was told, so I got 33 answers, and that was sort of a structured questionnaire leading them through the whole idea of what their view of service charges was, and then leading them into the idea that if there was a certification, how would that change their view moving on from that. In general, the landlords thought that it was a good idea, but they didn't think it would have that much traction with the tenants themselves. They like the idea of a kite mark, and unless they have to pay for it. So if it was able to be paid for by the tenants, then that would be no problem. But then they felt that the tenants would be against that, so it would almost be a self-destructive measure in terms of them. They didn't see again, I didn't lead them too much, but they didn't see the idea that the certification would improve their reputation enough to actually make a tangible difference. They said it'd be nice to have, but not enough to make it worth their while. One interesting thing was how low down they rated service charge sort of provision. They concurred with the tenants in terms of location and the monetary cost of the rent being very high up, but only 1 out of the 7 really mentioned service charges off their own bat. I mean, when I prompted certain things, they said, oh yes, service charges, but it's very low down, whereas the tenants actually had it fairly high up, surprisingly high up, because I actually only looked at the tenants' survey results right at the end. I didn't take a peek before all 33 were in, so I'd actually been building up this image of what, if they agreed with the landlords, what would happen. And in fact, I was quite pleasantly surprised that it was actually different. And that was one of the objects of the research, in one sense, was the idea of trying to show that there was a disconnect between what the landlords thought the tenants would think and what the tenants actually thought. So just before I opened the file, I was sort of hoping that this would happen, and in fact it did. So it sort of fitted in with what I thought would happen. In general, the tenants felt that service charge provision was more important than landlords thought it was. So the strange thing was that even though that was the case, the tenants didn't really see the worth of paying for a certification, but the reason was that they thought this was already happening. So it's actually quite an interesting thing happening. They saw service charges as very important, but why should we have a certification? Because it's already happening. We already get the certificate signed off, so why do we need anything else? So in one sense, it was a very weird mix of like them being ignorant as to what some service charge discrepancies there are, and the fact that they therefore felt that the certification may not be what was needed. Now, those who seem to have some history of knowing that service charges weren't all they were sort of built up to be, they seem to think, no, a certification would be worth it. And a couple of them actually said, yes, we'd actually be willing to pay for that. But in general, the lack of awareness as to what service charges actually were and what they were getting when they got this so-called audit of their certificate at the end of every year actually meant that they sort of thought, we don't need it because it's already happening.